Can we turn off?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for waiting. We were right here, ready to go. We've been sitting here, ready to go. And we had trouble getting online. But here we are now, and we're glad you're here. I'm Laura Chandler, the Executive Director of the Foundation of the Sacred Stream. And I'm with Isa Gucciardi, the founding director of the Sacred Stream, and also the creator of the model Depth Hypnosis, which we'll be talking about today. That's the subject. And yeah, it's really good to be back here doing a live and chatting with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be chatting with you and all of you.
Yeah. So I invite you to put any questions or comments that you have into the chat. We'd love to know that you're here, and we'd love to know where you're kind of chatting in from. You're not calling in, you're YouTubing in, I guess. So yeah, why don't you go ahead. I see Jen Maitreya here. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
And yeah, we're here to answer any questions that you have. And we're also going to be talking today about a very seemingly topical topic, which is trauma, and how this trauma generally, and also how the model Depth Hypnosis approaches it, perceives it, and works with it. And hi, Rebecca's here from West Palm Beach. Hello. Hot down there right now.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about depth hypnosis, we are talking about a preeminent model for dealing with trauma. And I think that, one of the things that we have to remember, or maybe realize, is that life today is traumatic. And I think that many of us have really gotten inured to the experience of trauma because there's so much violence and there's so much sort of permission to be unkind in the general cultural setting now. And I think that, when we look at kids today and we see how they're really struggling with all of the bullying that's going on online, and when we see how much difficulty that teenagers are having, there's this increase in a suicide rate, increase in drug use. And I really think it's an effort on their part to try to manage the level of trauma that they've been exposed to from a very young age. And that exposure comes from movies, it comes from video games. It's normal to shoot at someone and see them splinter apart in 100 pieces. There's this tolerance for really violent experience. And I think that what people don't realize is that that's traumatizing. That, being exposed to violence is traumatizing. And I think that it's become sort of like the background music in the culture. And that background music is playing in people's personal experience when they are in family systems where they have family members that are stressed with all of the stress that's happening. People are having difficulty maintaining their jobs, or they're having difficulty managing their own internal experience because they haven't had the education that they need on an emotional level to learn how to manage themselves. And, it's because the culture doesn't support it. And so I think that, as a child coming into a family system where you have people who are stressed, it's traumatizing, it's shocking. And yet it's all normal. It's all normal. Everybody thinks that, well, what's the matter with you? Dust yourself off and let's get going, and we haven't even started talking about the level of trauma that we recognize as traumatic, where you have sexual abuse in family systems that is higher than it's ever been, where you have domestic violence that is not even recognized as a problem until it reaches a certain point by law enforcement, where you have children that are neglected, and where you have a lot of, again, bullying, and that is recognized now as being recognized. But I've been working in the clinical setting for over 30 years, and I know that the early childhood experience is fundamental to the rest of the life. And people, I can't tell you how many times I've had clients tell me, nobody's ever asked me about my birth before. Nobody's ever asked me about my early childhood. And these are people that have been in therapy, and I really don't think that people understand how the early experience affects later experience. And that's one of the things that we really look at when we're looking at symptoms, trying to understand symptoms that people come in for help with. And of course, depth hypnosis is excellent for dealing with symptoms on the surface, such as, we can use suggestion hypnosis to help people stop smoking. We can use suggestion hypnosis for people who are dealing with fear of flying. But almost always, those phobias or those addictions are a function of the person trying to manage something deeper. Mm-hmm. And that something deeper is almost always something that has happened in the past that they may have actually forgotten about. Mm. And depth hypnosis is really good at figuring out what that is and offering assistance and healing to the underlying issues that are driving people's problems on a surface level.
Great. I wonder if it would be helpful even to start with talking a little bit about what you've gone over some really helpful ideas about what some really clear issues are, what causes of trauma. But how can we define trauma? That's something I think we hear a lot about trauma in the kind of in popular culture now. It's become popular to talk about trauma. And I really think that's actually good, because for so long we have tried to ignore it. And there's been a little bit of a machismo around, you had mentioned, like, what's wrong with you? Like, just get over it. We have, entire culture in the military that now is beginning to recognize PTSD. But for, so long, it was a little bit brushed under the carpet. So, one thought I've had about how to talk, what we might define trauma is as something that brings overwhelm to a person, where you experience an overwhelm that you just can't handle in the moment, that flood of emotion or reaction that you're having. So you might dissociate, you might have some sort of defense mechanism come in. And one of the things I know you and I have talked about is that sometimes different things are traumatic for different people. So something that might be traumatizing to one person is not traumatizing to another person for one reason or another. And also something that might have been traumatizing to us when we're younger is not something that we would necessarily experience that overwhelm with when we're older. So trauma can be a little bit tricky to sometimes recognize. Would you agree?
Not for me. I think, I'm so used to working with people on multiple levels.
Well, I mean, for people to recognize in themselves.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that, one of the things that trauma does, if we're talking about what is trauma and what is the definition of trauma, mm-hmm. One thing that trauma does is it has you mentioned a dissociation, but there's lots of different ways in which people respond to trauma. Yes. That are all about stepping away from the self in some way. Mm-hmm. So you could have dissociation where you have somebody who actually leaves the experience and mm-hmm. leaves themselves. You can have other people who get very frozen and hard and rigid, and so they can't feel trauma. Like, and the whole idea is to freeze internally so they don't feel. Mm-hmm. And so then when further traumatic experience happens, they get further traumatized, but they can't recognize it. And then you can have other responses to trauma are people get very busy. Like, okay, I'm going to be very busy. I'm going to work really hard. I'm just never going to have a moment that's down. And of course, that's supported by the culture. Let me give you some sugar. Let me give you some coffee, so you can keep doing that. And so people wouldn't have. It would be. You're right. It would be hard for them to recognize that there might be something that's underneath that reaction. Sometimes I think about, again, for me, like when I sit down with someone, or even when I'm with someone on a bus, I have to kind of put my blinders on, because I look at someone and I can see the effect of trauma really clearly in just surface level interactions. But I think when we're trying to find the source of the trauma, when in the clinical setting, sometimes I think about The Princess and the Pea, that fairy tale where the princess was trying to find a mattress when she was, allowed in from the storm into a neighboring castle, and she kept, actually, it's a long story. It's a great story. It's a way of she was being recognized as a princess if she could feel the pea at the bottom of 30 mattresses, and so they kept putting, anyway. Good story.
Okay.
So, but the P is at the bottom of everything. And I think that what we're doing with depth hypnosis, and which depth hypnosis has excellent tools to offer, is to uncover the P and to find what that source of all of the reactivity is. And then what we do with all of the different ways of working is once we uncover it, and we have several different strategies for doing that, all of which involve non-traumatizing, again, no further traumatizing. We have very safe ways to help people kind of move into looking for that P. And once we've identified it, we have a lot of good interventions that help the person change their relationship with that source trauma. And of course, one of the other things that happens is, trauma, once you've been traumatized in a particular way, further experience will traumatize you again. And there will be layers that will have a resonance with that first trauma. And so there's layers that happen. So like, for instance, your teacher in first grade might have screamed at you and told you, how stupid you were. And then when you get to middle school, you have a coach that tells you what a bad basketball player you are. And then you get to high school, and you've got a girlfriend who's telling you what a jerk you are. So it's like you've got all these messages of you're not good enough, and they get layered on top of each other. And so when we're working in depth hypnosis, we peel back those layers. We go to the core, and then we peel back the layers, and then we're able to send the healing into all the different layers of the self that are trying to manage the experience of the original trauma in different ways.
And just taking a moment to welcome everyone again and thank you for being here and joining us live here. And it looks like Joseph is here. Hi, Joseph.
Hi.
And Deirdre and Lucia from Mexico City. So we're glad to have you here. And if you'd like to let us know that you're here and where you're kind of watching us from, we'd love to hear from you. We'd also love any of your questions or comments. This is a really big subject. It's an important subject. So that's why we wanted to kind of come on here today and to talk about it. In part because I think a lot of people who do recognize that they have experienced trauma or are feeling, the effects of trauma, and we can maybe talk about like what those effects are, the ways that it affects our lives, the ways that it can affect our relationships, our work situation, how we show up in the world. I think a lot of times people can feel like they don't know what they can do about it, or it can feel, so big that it feels really impossible to live with or to be able to do something about. And I know I've been working in the depth hypnosis modality, both as a practitioner and as someone who has benefited from it. And I will just say that, personally, what drew me to it is that I healed what was a chronic depression, long time chronic depression. It was really helpful and effective. And so that's why we want to.
And was it due to trauma? Unrecognized trauma,
Well,
would you say?
Well,
or recognized trauma?
Well, yeah. And so
tell me about it.
Well, I do want to tell you about it. I want to say one more thing, and I want to ask everybody, please hit the like button, the little thumbs up button, and subscribe if you want to know more about, the different videos that we offer. But I forgot to say that earlier, because it helps the channel grow. It helps us reach more people. The algorithm gods do require it. No, I'm kidding. But if you're here and if you do like it, it would be helpful to us if you subscribe and like and share. So I would say yes. There's that moment where you kind of know what the wounding is, right? And so I think I understood what the wounding was. I mean, there was certainly other elements to it, but it was, I knew what it was, but I didn't have the tools. There were not modalities that were bringing the tools. And I would say depth hypnosis really brings those tools and they're tools you can work with for ongoing, and that can really bring a transformation to this thing that has had you feeling stuck. So I would say that was my experience. There was another thing I wanted to say regarding.
But did you figure out what the originating trauma was?
Well,
I don't want to put you on the spot, but yeah. I'm just trying to prove our point. I'm just trying to show our point.
Yeah. Well, I've taken this. Yes, I did. And it has become certainly a path for me, and it's become a spiritual path for me, so that I'm working on kind of uncovering as much of my experience as I can. So I do work with the modality to continue to kind of deepen my connection to understanding myself and those things. So now it's just a very supportive tool for my own spiritual practice, but yes, in terms of where I was stuck around what the known wounding, I would say probably the most important aspect was in reaching that wounding and bringing consciousness to it and understanding it in a new way that I would not have gotten to with just my
very intelligent noggin.
my cognitive process.
Sorry, I didn't need to.
No, I said intelligent noggin is very nice. But it really helped me to see it in a new way and to gain this insight and perspective that I could not have gotten to, just through the understand. And and believe me, I tried. So yeah, it was revelatory. And, I don't want to sound too like overly, but it was. And I think a lot of people have experienced that. And maybe some people here have experienced that and would like to share their experience. But, what we're talking about is this consciousness and an expansion of consciousness and working. I think one of the important aspects of depth hypnosis is working in an altered state that is not using drugs or plants to alter the state, but altering the state naturally
with suggestions
with
for
hypnosis,
relaxation,
and with hypnosis
meditation.
Yeah. But when you are working this way and you're going in with the intention to understand something, you're able to go beyond the story you have in your head, and you're able to go beyond your conscious perception of it and kind of reach new insight. And so that is, I think, a really powerful aspect.
And you're also able to figure out why you have some of the symptoms that are related to trauma, such as nightmares,
Mhm.
losing time, not being able to focus very well, having problems with attention, and you know, being jumpy and not understanding why you feel jumpy. And those are just the symptoms that you have before you start trying to medicate them with alcohol or pot or some other kind of drug or some other kind of behavior, such as
food or exercise,
overworking, or something like that. But I think that when you realize that it's normal that you would be feeling feeling depressed or feeling anxiety, or having difficulty sleeping, or having dreams that offer you perhaps insight if you could listen, but you can't really listen because you're too traumatized, right? So once you realize that it's normal, that these symptoms are there, and then then there's this relief that, oh, maybe something can be done about it. But again, I think that people are worried about not being normal. They try to be normal, they try to conform, and I think that's very difficult when you've had any kind of traumatic experience to really find that sense of well-being that you're talking about, that comes in as you are able to expand your awareness of yourself doing depth hypnosis. So I think that it's all learning. It's all learning about the self. I mean, the presenting symptom, I often say in depth hypnosis courses, the presenting symptom is often the tip of the iceberg of a much larger problem. And it's actually an opportunity. And I think that with depth hypnosis, when you come into a session, we spend time looking at your emotional biography, looking at the biography of the presenting problem, looking at any kind of dreams that you may have had as you were thinking about coming into the session. And then we help you connect with inner guidance using that altered state of awareness that Laura was talking about. And then we begin to head into the deeper work. And, I think that when we find that, there is a pathway in, and there is a pathway to resolution of the symptom, and most symptoms get resolved, not necessarily resolved, but there is a change in symptomology within the first 5 to 6 sessions for many people. I'm not saying for everyone, but for many people, there is a shift very early on. And then it's at that moment where they begin to realize, oh, that symptom was the tip of that iceberg. And now I can try to understand these other layers, these other ways of behaving that I've had that might offer me more understanding about how I may be separated from myself, which is causing me trauma. And that's one thing I'd like to talk about a little bit about that. You were talking about the definition of trauma.
Yeah.
One way you can always define trauma is something that separates you from yourself.
Yeah.
So when people are jumping, I remember when I was a little girl, I was living in Mexico, and I remember there was a jewelry store that my family always visited, and when we were there, because they knew the people who ran it. And working in that jewelry store was a woman who, every time the door opened, she would do this, and I was like trying to understand what is going on with her. And she handed a watch to someone, and I saw the numbers on her wrist from having been, and she was in Auschwitz and a concentration camp during World War II. And that was 19 that was the late 1960s right there.
Mhm.
And so for 20 years, she had been jumping, or 25 years, she had been jumping every time the door
Mhm.
opened,
Mhm.
right? And she, that was a seminal moment for me. I really needed to understand that. I really wanted to understand her experience.
Mhm.
And I think that, it is really important for us all to try to understand our experience when we're having these kinds of
Mhm.
of of issues. Things. Something as simple as not being able to pay attention can be
Mhm.
indicative of something bigger. And I think that I think we can really understand what this means to be separated from ourselves, and then what this means to be able to find our way home to ourselves. And this is, I think, what depth hypnosis really provides. It provides a way home,
Mhm.
and you're able to come home to yourself through healing your experience of trauma.
Yeah, and I've heard you talk a lot about like fragmentation, and one way to think about this separating from the self is that, if you think about, if you've heard the term compartmentalizing, we compartmentalize things. Well, that is that's a kind of separating from the self. And so I know really at the heart of depth hypnosis is this understanding that we are already whole, and that we're just clearing the obscurations to that. So finding these parts of us that are stuck, like this woman that you described, who's exhibiting PTSD-like symptoms with the jumping. There's some part of her psyche, right, cycling in that trauma. And so it is possible to reach that place, for her to reach that place in her. It's not the practitioner who's reaching that place. It's the practitioner helping the person to do their own healing work, and to find those parts, to find those places where they've disconnected and clear the obscuration, or the thing, the compartmentalization or the fragmentation, integrating the fragmentation. And it is possible. And I think that is really the key.
So like in this case with her, for instance, if she were a client and she was coming in because she was jumping every time the door opened. So what we would have done, what we would do, which I would love to be able to do for her, is, help her, talk about, her emotional biography, which would be very complex, the problem, the problem of the jumping. And then, we would, through the altered state guided meditation, connect her with a inner guidance that could help support her and guide her and protect her, as we would then use regression work, following the emotion and the jumping. We would follow that emotion, and we would follow it into the body. And while she's in an altered state, we're working with the emotion and working with the meditation to go in on the emotion through the body. And very likely we would wind up in a situation or circumstance in that camp where she was being traumatized in some way. And then we would work with the inner guidance and work with her larger self to help her change her experience of being caught in that trauma, and then
not change the experience,
not the experience, but her
retrieving the part,
and bringing that part
aspect.
Helping her bring that part out of the traumatic experience into her own heart and into her own self. And with this kind of work in depth hypnosis, we bring all the different parts of the self that get separated due to traumatic experience. And it is it's a very beautiful process. It's a very enlivening process, and people feel deeply changed because they can feel themselves in a new way. They are able to understand they can feel their internal light in a new way, because one of the things that happens with trauma is that it obscures your own essence from you, either because your reactions to the trauma are obscuring, and then your initial response to the trauma is an obscuration as well. So we, by resolving all of the patterns around a traumatic experience, we're able to help people feel more whole. And this is a wonderful thing to be able to offer someone.
Yeah. And again, I just want to welcome everyone and invite you to make any comments or give us any questions. Let us know you're here and where you're watching us from. If you could hit the like and subscribe buttons, that helps us reach more people in the YouTube world. I think that, the thing I can't emphasize enough is that, on one level, trauma is part of this world. It's not something that someone is not going to be born here and live their lives and come to the end of their lives and not have had some experience that was overwhelming to them and caused some kind of a trauma-like reaction. So I think what I want to say is that, it's not something there's certainly very extreme traumatic experiences, as like the woman you were describing. And, but there are also more subtle ones and ones you might not think were. So it's important to recognize this is part of being here. And so it's important to know that, there are ways to work with it and to not have it run your life.
And there's wisdom that emerges from learning how to resolve it. I think that's the important thing to remember, is that, people will often, my clients will often think that there's something wrong with them because they don't feel right. And I think that, one of the, blessings of doing this inner work is that you learn about yourself, and you can look at your life as a path, and everything along that path is something that is providing you with insight. And when you begin to look at difficulties in that way, and you begin to see that, maybe there's an insight that I can gain here. Maybe there's something that I can learn not only about myself, but about my relationship to reality, right? And about the nature of the world.
Yeah.
And depth hypnosis does get that big that fast.
It's pretty fast.
It's pretty, you do get those, you do begin to really understand yourself and your relationship in the world in a new way.
Now, one of the things I want to mention is we have a training, a depth hypnosis training coming up, the Depth Hypnosis Foundation course, for people who are interested in becoming practitioners or who are interested in hypnotherapy certification. And I'll also say that it is a very personally transformative class as well. So it's a training in the modality, and you will be transformed. I think it's safe to say. But I want to say that when I met Isa 21 years ago, you had just started teaching depth hypnosis, because when you created the modality and you started working with clients, and you had studied transpersonal psychology and Buddhism and shamanism and energy healing techniques from around the world, and you kind of brought it all together in this modality. And when I met you, you were working 6 days a week, like 9 hours a day, and doing accounting on Sundays. And
I'm not a workaholic, okay? Just so you know.
She has some depth hypnosis to do for that. No, but and so you decided that the only way that you could help so her practice was full and she couldn't take more clients. So
I had a waiting list.
Yeah. So you started training practitioners, and that's how this program started over 20 years ago. And now we have the Sacred Stream Center, and we teach other classes, and we have other teachers who come and teach. But this is the core. This is the reason why Sacred Stream exists, and this is why all the other programs come out of. And
yeah, it's it's been very interesting to watch it evolve over time, and certainly I continue to learn about it every day. I mean, we're one of the things that you'll see if you decide you want to take the training in depth hypnosis to be able to help other people do this is that your learning evolves constantly. Sometimes I joke around and say, I've just got the best job in the world because I get to, one of the things I learned early on was that I needed to have my office near a garden, because my first office was on Valencia Street, this very busy street in San Francisco. And, people would be in this altered state, and then they'd open the door and all this going on, it was like just traumatizing again, right? So very quickly I realized that I had to find an office that was in a quiet place. And so, I get to work in this office that's connected to a garden. People come to me, they teach me about the psyche, and then they pay me. It's like, what a job is this? I have learned so much from my clients, and I have learned so much about the nature of reality and the nature of healing from that I didn't know in those early years that I've learned since then. And I would say every day I learn something new, every day. And so if you are thinking about taking depth hypnosis, the foundation course, you will learn, and you will learn about yourself as well. People do a lot of personally transformative work during the training, as well as learning the techniques for helping other people.
And we have a question about that. And I also want to welcome Mike Cowan from LA, and Hello Yoda from the Bay Area, and Isabel from Montreal. Welcome.
Bonjour.
And Rebecca asks, do we go through our own trauma processing through the program in order to be a container for others? And do we have to do sessions with certified practitioners through the course?
Well, in order to get the certificate, you have to do personal sessions with a depth hypnosis practitioner. And in doing your own work, it's true, you do become a better container for other people, because the more spaciousness you have within you, the more easily you can sit with other people's experience. I mean, sometimes also, once you've done some of your own work, you begin to find, you find the path. There's let's say trauma is a field, and everyone has a different path through it. But once you've kind of healed your own trauma, you can kind of look around and say, oh, is that path, or is this path? You recognize the field, and you learn how to help other people identify their own path through it, through having found your path through it. And so it is extremely instructive. So yes, you do your own work, and yes, you do become a good container for other people in doing that.
It's, it's an extremely experiential model for clients, and it's experiential for you as the practitioner in training. But I want to emphasize this, because I know the topic today is trauma, and even saying the word is loaded for me. It's just like trauma, So it's just why I want to say, trauma exists, suffering exists, but also so does joy and happiness, and it doesn't have to run you. Okay.
And one can lead to the other.
And one does lead to the other. But we're not in depth hypnosis or in the training. It's not like you're coming in and we're going, we're looking for your trauma. That's not happening at all. What's happening is you're learning the processes, and the processes are so natural. This is one of the really catalytic and I think unique aspects of the model is it's following, it's paying very close attention to what you're bringing in. So it's like, I just feel this sadness. And, one of the aspects of depth hypnosis is that it's open to, it does not prescribe, but it's open to the idea of past lives. And so sometimes people do end up in a past life regression. We don't say we're going into a past life regression, or we know we had this traumatic experience, so we've got to go back there. That's not a good idea. That would be re-traumatizing. So you're taught, and when as a practitioner and also as the client going in, you're very connected to your own inner guidance, to source of compassion and wisdom larger than yourself. You're really grounded in this before you do any work, and then you're following it to it's going to present if you're ready for it to present. And so yeah, so you do get to work. So you may have something that you specifically want to work on, and you can do that in the course of your training when we do practice sessions, or you may not know what you want to work on. And so then you come up with something, but it's not like we're driving for trauma. We're really opening to the wisdom of the self. And there's so much wisdom in the self, and it will take you where you need to go at the pace you need to go. And depth hypnosis is excellent at meeting you where you are. So some people like to go deep, hard and fast, and that's what works for them. And some people need to go slower, and depth hypnosis is right there with where you need to be. And I think that's a really supportive and helpful aspect of the model.
Yeah, that's true. Any other questions?
Not seeing any other questions.
Okay, all right. If you've got questions, this is the time.
Yeah, and I'll just say while you type your questions, if you have them, I'll say that there are a lot of tools. Depth hypnosis is not prescriptive, as I said. You don't have to believe in anything. You don't have to believe in past lives. You don't have to believe in anything. You are determining for yourself what your experience is, and you're defining everything for yourself. And so it's very open that way, and welcoming that way to people's experience. And it also has a lot of tools. So for some people, certain things work for them better than other things. So this sort of array of tools enables people to find what works for them. And one of the things that you're really good at, Isa, and that you teach about in the class is working with dreams. And dreams are this way that the subconscious communicates with you.
It's the email from the higher self.
It's a text now, dear.
I have to tell this story because it's my favorite story to tell.
Okay.
So in the 90s, some of you I know
may not have been born
don't
yet.
Remember a world without email, but there was a world without email. And as it was coming in, we were all trying to figure out, what is this thing? You go to the computer and what do you do? And I figured it out. And I thought, so I still do. I give lectures on dreams. I mean, it's kind of my thing. And I used to give a lecture called Dreams, Email from the Higher Self. I thought I was just the coolest thing ever. Yeah, but that was a long time ago, and but I still like to tell the joke. Now it's anyway.
Now it's like VHS.
Yeah, it is email from the higher self. It truly is. And if you can learn how to listen to your dreams, it's not at all unusual that you would have a dream, especially as you are coming into a transformative process or any kind of therapeutic process. Actually, it would not be at all unusual that you would get a dream that would provide you with maybe an emotional experience of an emotion you hadn't had for a long time, or that you might have a dream about a situation that you had forgotten about, or where you may have you might even have a nightmare. And I always say, I'm teaching a class on dreams coming up. If people are particularly interested in dreams, there's a dreams class coming up shortly
in August.
Early August. And I always say that nightmares are very good news, because they are going to show you something that you need to know. and about yourself. And it's simply a matter of learning how to listen. And one of the things that I try to teach people how to do is to speak the language of dreams. It's a language of image, and I help you learn how to open the images in your dreams so that you can understand them on your own terms, in your own way. And so some people in depth hypnosis may have a process of depth hypnosis that's very focused on dreams. Another person may not feel that comfortable going into an altered state. And then we have a process called insight inquiry, where we ask you questions based on your previous answer. And it's a method of questioning that is very incisive and that brings you right to the core of something within a few questions. I remember one time I had a student who was, she was a traditionally trained therapist. And she was, in a lot of different counseling models, they teach you other ways of asking questions, which, everything is valid. Every technique is valid. And that she was really into reflecting, and this is what they teach you in a lot of counseling programs. I went to the store. Oh, you went to the store. It's a way of making someone feel comfortable, making them feel heard. It's a way to work. That's good. And she, she threw down the gauntlet and she said, I think this is the better way to work. My way to work is better. I said, okay, let's see. let's do a challenge, And so I said, we each got 10 questions. Let's see how quickly we can get to the core issue. So I went first and with insight inquiry. And on the 6th question, she got down on her knees and said, okay, uncle. So I didn't have to do it the other way. It was good. That's good. But it's a very, very helpful for people that are not quite ready to go into an altered state and work.
And we have ways of helping people step into an altered state
absolutely.
That's comfortable.
Yes.
But for anyone who's interested in the training, please let us know. You can email us and you can go to the website. I think Cody's probably will put that link up. And you can learn more about the class. You can learn more about the certification in hypnotherapy and also as a depth hypnosis practitioner. So if it sounds like it's something that you would be interested in, let us know if you're interested in finding a practitioner. We also have a lovely website, the Association of Depth Hypnosis Practitioners, the ADHP, that has a list of all the people practicing depth hypnosis around the world. And you can work with anyone really on Zoom now. So if you find a practitioner that resonates with you, then they're probably available to work remotely. And so just wrapping up, anything else that you would like to say, or I don't see any other questions, or we would answer them, but hopefully that means we've done a good job describing the model and talking about trauma.
There's one thing that I want to add, it's a little bit, I'm kind of like opening up a big subject at the very end, but I just want to offer it because so many people have troubles in their relationships. And depth hypnosis is also a very good model for helping you understand what's going on in your relationships and helping you understand what your relationship is showing you about yourself.
Yeah.
It really, when we look at relationships within depth hypnosis, I actually call them a cauldron of transformation. I know it's big, dramatic words, but anyone who's in a relationship knows it's not too dramatic, right? But one of the things, and speaking of trauma and relationship, one of the things, that was dramatic, not traumatic. But I'm talking about trauma. I want to talk about trauma and relationship. One of the things that really emerges in working with relationships in the depth hypnosis environment, when people are having difficulties in relating, as we go deeper in and we remove the different layers, one of the things that we find very frequently in problems with relationship is that two people have been drawn together because they have the opposite response to a similar trauma. So I have found this in, I would say, 75% of the people that I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of different couples, where, for instance, they might both come from that maybe the trauma that they both have is that they grew up in an alcoholic household. And so, but they had different responses to the fact that the parents were violent or absent or neglectful, whatever the trauma is. And so, for instance, you could have an older sibling who, within the family system, who might take on all the responsibility, make the lunches for the younger siblings, help them with their homework, you know, try to make sure that everything is working okay when the parents are passed out on the couch, right? And then you might have a younger sibling in another family system that's got, you know, difficulty going on with addiction, and they find that they have found that the only time they get attention is if there's something wrong with them, so that they will feign weakness in order to get some attention, right? So these are two coping mechanisms that where the two different people as children, you know, came to as they were trying to manage a traumatic situation. And so as they get older and they form relationships, interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships, or even non-romantic relationships, but especially romantic relationships, the person who needs attention is going to be attracted to someone who wants to have responsibility for everything. And the person who wants to have responsibility to everything is going to be attracted to the person who needs attention, because they're going to want to make it better to make things okay, right? So you see, that's a pretty, you know, simple. It's not simple at all, that example I gave you, because there's many different layers to it, but it's a pretty clear example. And often you find in relationship dynamics that people who are attracted to each other and then who have things to work out with each other often have that
Similar
opposite response to a similar wound, a similar trauma. So I just wanted to offer that because I think it's something to think about, and it's something to really, you know, begin to understand the widespread effect and the far-reaching effect of trauma, even as it enters into our interpersonal relating.
And I think we're going to be doing more of these lives, and we probably should do one on relationships.
I'm in.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and for liking, for subscribing, for if you want to join our newsletter, we'll keep you posted on, you know, what's going on and discounts. I think we have a sale in the store right now, and we'll be back soon with another live.
We do this once a month, right?
Yeah, and maybe more. And I want to thank Cody, who's here behind the scenes, taking care of everything for us. As always, we greatly appreciate him. And we will see you next time. And thank you for your thank yous. We appreciate it. Thanks for being here. We'll see you soon.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.